Changing Lanes, the official podcast of BMW. Welcome to this episode of Changing Lanes, the official podcast of BMW. My name is Jonathan, and today on the podcast, we have a very special guest, British racing driver Charlie Barton. She's made history as one of the first out transgender people in motorsports, breaking a huge barrier in a largely hetero male sport and industry. Not only that, but she is now focusing on breaking the next barrier, becoming the first trans person to compete in the iconic 24 Hours of Le Mans, the oldest active endurance sports car race in the world. Charlie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jonathan. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
My pleasure. So I know that I covered some things in the intro, but definitely not everything. So maybe do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I come from Leicestershire in the middle of England, which is not too far from Silverstone. It's pretty handy. I'm a few little facts about me. I have a cat. I'm ambidextrous. I'm a big sports lover. I love trail running and surfing, snowboarding, things like that. Right now I've just been having a slightly strange time, like a lot of people, really getting through this summer, but also been lucky to have had a pretty good racing season, racing over in Germany at the Nürburgring. And right now just looking to next year, making plans for the 2021 season, continuing training and all the kind of normal day-to-day things I'm trying to do, and getting ready for my final race of this season later this month.
Wow. So many things going on, so active, and that is just fantastic. And, there's a million things that I want to ask you and talk to you about, but instead of me jumping all over the place from sheer excitement, why don't we start at the very beginning, at 8 years old, when you wondered about sports, and originally you wanted to become a fighter pilot. Is that right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the spark in you that made you become a race driver.
So, I was born in the 80s, and there's a very famous film, which I'm sure you can think of, called Top Gun, which was my favourite film when I was growing up. And I must have watched that film I don't know how many times, but I was fascinated with flying and the idea of becoming a fighter pilot when I was young. So for a long time, that was all I really thought about. And I suppose that whole world of speed and adrenaline and doing something just amazing, like flying, was always, it was always at the forefront of my mind. And I kind of gave up on the idea of being a fighter pilot when I was coming into my teens. Unfortunately, I just realised I wouldn't get the grades because maths and physics are subjects that I've always struggled with. And around that time, I had a really good friend at school called Hamish, and his dad was a racing driver. And I would go over to his go over to his house for the weekend, and we would occasionally go racing with his dad. I remember the first time he was like, if you want to come this weekend, it's cool, but we're going to be camping and we'll be in the race paddock and trying to help my dad out and everything. And so, I just threw myself into that experience, and I really loved being in the paddock. I loved that whole environment and being up close and feeling like you're actually a part of what's happening.
Yeah.
I think that was something that just really, really sparked my imagination. And, previously I'd only ever seen motorsport on television. And I think when you see it up close, you hear it, you even smell it. It's a very visceral environment to find yourself in as a young child as well. So I guess I was like, 8, 9, 10 years old the first time that happened. And growing up, I when I started playing computer games. They were always like, racing games and things like that. Learning to drive. It was car culture was quite an important thing for me and my friends. We all had quite like modified cars and stuff like that. So I think we all, it was just whether it was motorsport or more car culture, it was just something that was a theme running through my entire childhood, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
And like you said, with car culture and making it work for you and stuff like that, you bought a Formula Renault and built a racetrack motorhome in 4 months. Is that right? And then you competed and had a crazy adventure that lasted 3 years. Like, that's amazing. So what was one thing that you learned about starting a career in motorsport during that time from being in the paddock and getting that excitement and that experience, that visceral experience, to actually doing it yourself and creating this career?
Hey, I mean, one of the first things I learned is that motorsport is, it's a difficult industry, a difficult sport to just get into, especially when you don't have any family history of competing or anything like that. I mean, I lost my dad to cancer when I was quite young, and my mum as well, not that long after, when I was in my early 20s. So I never had that traditional, sort of routine that most kids tend to, when they start karting and everything like that. But I also learned that, although it can seem quite opaque to somebody on the outside looking inwards, that it depends where you want to start. And actually, there are ways into motorsport which are quite accessible. And for me, that was hill climbing, because I experienced circuit racing and hill climbing and sprinting with my friend and his dad. And hill climbing seems like something where, if you don't know a lot about cars, you can almost turn up in your road car and just drive that. And
wow,
you don't need to be able to strip an engine to pieces and all the other things that you typically think somebody might have all that knowledge and that training. And of course, through being there and once I started racing, I found that paddock was really, really helpful. People were super friendly. People wanted to see younger people coming into the sport, of course. And so there was, as much as I loved the racing, I loved sharing my time with people who shared the same passion, because we all had that amazing connection that brought us together. And you'd stand around a weekend talking to people about cars. So you pick a lot up. You learn a lot just through being in that environment. And so, I mean, when I began, I didn't really have any massive aspirations about having a career. For me at that point in my life, it was more of a hobby. And I'll be honest, I didn't think that it was anything that would really go beyond that. I thought, okay, this is my kind of happy place. I like hill climbing. It's great. And in terms of, I always said to myself, well, because I've not done karting, no one will ever take me seriously. I don't have the level of ability that people do have who've done that route. And, I'll never have the money that you need to go beyond this stage. But as you say, I mean, I reached that point where I went off to race in France, and I realized that there was a whole opportunity to go and compete abroad. And I just threw myself at it. I sold my car. I bought the Formula Renault and built myself a motorhome that was like a kind of motorhome come racetrack. So it was like the car went on the bottom, and then there was like a tail lift, and then there was like a mezzanine floor that I built above it. So it was pretty compact, I'll be honest. But I just looked at it like necessity is the mother of invention. And if I want to go racing in Europe, I have to have a truck that I can live in, with a bed and a shower and stuff like that. And I just lived like this kind of nomad, racing and traveling around France. And it was an incredible thing to do.
I think there's something to be said about you saying that you weren't born into a family of motorsport and it wasn't handed down to you, that you had this thing in you that said, I just want to go out and try and see and explore and experiment. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work, but at least I tried. That thing inside of you is so inspirational to me, and surely to our podcast listeners, of you have that spark in you, and if you don't listen to that spark, it's going to grow and grow and grow until you explode out and then say, okay, I don't know why, but I have to build my own race truck motorhome and get to France to compete. I absolutely love that.
It all started because I'd always watched European hill climbing on YouTube, and I wanted to go and do it, but I just said it's impossible. I live in England, I have a job here, and so on and so on. And I went over there and had an amazing result. I just entered this race as a one-off, and just in the way you described, really, actually, I had this feeling in me, this feeling in my gut that I have to go over there and race, like some kind of instinct, whatever you want to call it, determination to do something which everyone around me pretty much was saying, this is crazy. Like, how are you going to do this on your own? How this, what if this, what if you crash? And ordinarily, when everybody around you who has probably a lot more experience is saying, don't do this, it's a bad idea, it's a silly idea, you listen. But something in me just said, Dad, they're wrong, and I can do this, and I'm going to prove not only to them, but prove to myself that I can do this, that I'm capable, and I have the raw determination to make this work. And it was hard. It was hard work, but what an experience.
Exactly. Wow. So let's move on over to motorsport being a heavily male-dominated industry. I mean, it was groundbreaking news when Flick Haig was the first woman to achieve an overall win in the British GT Championship. And I mean, even you've said that only 6% of UK race license holders are female, which blew my mind. So, Charlie, who are your female role models that you look up to on and also off of the racetrack?
Yeah, I think in terms of the racetrack, I mean, I'd have to say Michelle Mouton. Firstly, because of what she was doing back at a time when female visibility and representation in motorsport was so much thinner than it is today. And of course, there were other women racing in that era, but I think racing in Group B and having the successes that she had, and also racing at Pikes Peak, which is something that's still an ambition of mine. I think she's someone who's had a huge impact in terms of inspiring other women to come into the sport, and also what she's doing now as president of the Women's Commission in the FIA. I think moving away from motorsport, I'd say Jessie Graf, who's someone who, if you're not familiar, she's an American athlete who competes on Ninja Warrior, which is something I did in the UK. So I think I really appreciate firsthand the strength and agility that's required to get to the high stages of competition in Ninja Warrior. And if you look at like the videos of stuff she does, like training and then the Ninja Warrior competitions, just an incredible athlete, and her strength. I mean, anyone who says women don't have the physical strength to compete in Formula One, go and watch Jessie Graf, because that will completely do a whole system reset on any kind of argument against that. I think she's just amazing. I think as well, people are a little bit like unheard of these days, throughout history. I remember I was researching a project and I came across Valentina Tereshkova. She was the first woman into space.
Oh, wow.
And I just kind of went down a rabbit hole on her story, and she logged more flight time than any previous astronaut any US astronaut that came before her.
Really?
She really set like a massive benchmark. And yet, one of the reasons I found her story so compelling is that, when you think of the space race, everyone can name Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, the first men to walk on the moon, and so on and so on. But I thought, I bet very few people would be able to name her, and yet her achievements were just incredible, regardless of whether she was a male or female. But as a woman in that era, achieving that was just wow.
Fantastic. I can't hold it in any longer. I need to ask and go completely off topic really quickly. I'm a huge fan of Ninja Warrior. How was it being on the course?
It really, it's really scary actually, because insofar as, maybe scary is not the right word. It's really, say when you compete on the program and you the first time you really get to go on the course, that's you on the course, standing there on television. That is your attempt.
So there's no pre-run. There's no practice run.
No practice. Gosh. You get to go in and you see the course from the side, like standing down on the ground, with one of the course testers showing you how to do it or how not to. If you put your hand here, you're disqualified. That kind of thing. So the first time you see it in first person view, laid out ahead of you, is when you do it, and it really gives you an appreciation of when you're sitting at home on your sofa watching something like that, going, oh no, why are you doing it like that? Oh, something looks really, really easy. Believe me, it's not. Wow. When you're there for the first time, it's you just suddenly focus and everything else kind of evaporates away. But it's it was I had an amazing time being on that show.
Wow.
Everyone on it was so inspiring. All the other contestants and the people that make it. It was, and getting up the wall first time.
Wow.
It's got to be one of my greatest moments, I think. Hitting that big red button and the fireworks go off.
Of course. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, with the having your tunnel vision focus on the course. I mean, that's something that you have to do when you're behind the wheel as well on the racetrack. And so bringing it back to motorsport, thank you for indulging me about Ninja Warrior. Well, a positive thing about motorsport is that there is no gender division, which is different with other sports. So tell us a little bit more about that and how that makes you feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I really love about motorsport. I mean, there's a few different layers to this. I think first things first, I just love being love being a woman in this sport. I think it's it's great to be in a sport where men and women compete equally, where there is no separation, and it's all about just getting in the car and doing your best. I mean, fitness and strength to an extent. I think, depending on what type of car you're driving, certainly if you're in a single seater, you do need a lot of fitness and strength. But nonetheless, I think the fact that women have consistently demonstrated that we do have everything it takes to win in this sport is really a really compelling vision of just equality, really.
Totally.
And I love being a part of that. I love when you tell someone you're a racing driver and they're like, whoa, it's always a surprise to them.
Yeah.
I think as a woman, it makes me very proud to be doing something that that maybe goes against the grain. I'm all for breaking down gender stereotypes. I think that it's something that there's a lot of positives that come from doing that. And I think fundamentally people should just do what they love doing and what they're good at doing, whether that's a career, a sport, whatever.
Amen.
So I think being a part of that is cool. But I think also, the other layer is really that as a trans woman, I feel very lucky, genuinely, that I compete in a sport that's mixed, because I think we're going through, a period of where there's a lot of transphobia in elements of the media, and certainly in terms of sport. I mean, just recently, in the last week or so, we've had World Rugby declare that trans women are going to be banned from competing in professional level rugby.
Really?
Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to go too deep into this because I realize it's a very divisive argument, and there's so much we could say around it. But I think the worrying thing with that is that just on a simplistic level, it sets a very worrying precedent for other sports, because other sports will look at this, and sport is something that brings us all together and unites us all, whether as fans or as players or whatever. And I think that anything that creates division is it's a sad thing to see happen. So I feel very fortunate that I compete in a sport where there's no question of that argument being used against me, that someone's saying, oh, I have an unfair advantage or something like that, because my experience on Ninja Warrior taught me that there were women and girls on that show who are every bit as strong as me or stronger than me. So I have I think some pretty well-informed views on that. But I just, I love doing what I do. Yeah. It's as simple as that.
I can tell. Speaking about the gender division and everything, even with no gender division, still motorsport is a heavily male heteronormative world. So when you decided to transition, that was a massive struggle for you. I mean, you even said, I thought people would make fun of me. I thought people would be unkind. And the sport that I love, obviously, as you've been telling us today, would end up being the thing that I hated. When you said that it truly broke my heart. And you couldn't bear to see that happen. So my question to you is, would you like to tell us more about what was going on for you when you did decide to transition?
I reached a very dark place in my life, if I'm honest, and probably the lowest point I've ever gone to. And I've been to some pretty low points in my life, as I said, losing both my parents. It's kind of, I've had my fair share of adversity to overcome, but this just, I'd known I was trans from 6, maybe 7 years old, but it was something I'd never dealt with. And I'd continually come to this crossroads where I had to make a decision. Only this time, things had got so difficult for me to try and act like this wasn't happening anymore, that I knew there was only one way forwards if I wanted to carry on living. And a big catalyst for this decision was actually discovering people like me for the first time in my life. People who were relatable, because I'd gone through my life growing up, of course, the 80s, the 90s. There was no internet, no YouTube or anything like this. And so the only transgender people I'd ever seen presented to me were a character in a film, or basically a very negative portrayal of a transgender person. And so there was this massive disconnect between what I felt about who I am as a person, as a human being, and the reality of transition and what that might look like. And suddenly I discovered people like me vlogging about their transition on YouTube. And these were people my own age, people with normal lives and normal ups and downs and all these things. And it was a complete game changer for me, because suddenly these people, they were relatable. Like they were just going through the same thing I was going through. And all of a sudden, it was like someone told me the world isn't flat anymore, And I realized that there was a whole life I could be living that I wasn't living. And the realization that maybe I was going to live my entire life and never know who I am. That's a pretty depressing thought.
Yeah, of course.
See yourself in the mirror in the morning and see this reflection staring back at you and think, I have no idea who this person is, because they don't feel like me. And so, yeah, I think having to make that choice was really, in some ways, really hard. But actually, once I'd rationalized it on my mind, it was a very straightforward process because, even now, people in 2020, people still feel like they have to choose between who they are as a person and who they are in their career, who they are in their sport. It's so sad because I know the difference this has made to me in my life, and that's why I'm fighting to increase acceptance and positive change, because I want everybody to be able to have what I've had. It's a simple human right.
Exactly. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's helping a lot of our podcast listeners know what was going on for you during your transition. So thank you. And you took the time to transition for yourself, which is very important. But then there was also another huge hurdle to overcome, which was coming out as a trans woman to the motorsport world in 2012. Ooh, so if you're willing, could you tell us more about the process of coming out to the motorsport world and how that made you feel?
It made me feel terrified.
I'm sure.
Yeah, is the simple answer to that question. I gave up because I just thought I'm never going to be accepted in the paddock as me. In the early stages of transition, there were just so many unknowns for me, and that was probably one of the greatest. I'd never seen anybody in motorsport who was LGBTQ. Not firsthand, not through a colleague or a story, not through anyone I'd seen on television, nowhere. There was nothing to tell me that people would, that if I am going to be if I'm going to go through this process, that actually, I'm going to be supported. And when you can't see that support, it's really, it makes you feel quite bleak, really, because anecdotally I'd heard people come out with normal sort of casual homophobic remarks, or just things that I just couldn't imagine how this was ever going to be okay. And it's worth saying as well, because now people see me, I look, I'm comfortable with the way I look and the way I sound and everything else. But back in 2012, I didn't look and sound like this. It was a very different story for me. I felt very conspicuous in that stage of my transition. I felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb. I didn't have anything like the confidence and self-belief that I have now, which mean that I can walk into, I do public speaking these days. I can walk on a stage in front of hundreds of people and I get a few butterflies, but I'm a very different person to who I was back then. And so when I came out and told a couple of friends, two of my best friends, one of them never spoke to me again.
Oh, jeez.
And that's two people. And so I'm like, well, that's not a very good start. And walking back into the paddock for the first time, by the time I'd finally built up to saying to myself, I need to go back. I need to see if I have a future here. And there's only one way. There's only one way I'm going to find that out. And that's to actually just jump in at the deep end and do it. And I just remember walking into a sea of blank faces, really. Of all the people that I knew that day, a lot of them didn't know what was happening, maybe didn't recognize me, just didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
And so, 6 or 7, 8, 9 maybe of my friends came over from the class that I raced in and gave me a big hug and all smiles and just really made me feel that they were so happy to see me back racing.
Great.
And
that's great.
Yeah, if they hadn't done that, I mean, that one gesture from them and the love that I felt in that moment was really profound. And that was the thing that made me think, okay, next year I'll come back and I'll race. And if this is as bad as it gets, well, it can only get better.
Exactly. I absolutely love how you've explained that one gesture, of 8 or 9 friends coming over, giving you a hug, checking in with you, seeing how you're doing. Yeah, I think there's a lot of lack of understanding, and lack of understanding can lead to awkwardness out of fear of saying the wrong thing. But I absolutely admire you for taking the initiative to start a discussion that opened things up, and just walking through the doors of the paddock, just being there and being able to start a conversation to help inform people. That was very brave of you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was, it wasn't an easy thing to do. Like I say, I had no choice. I had to go in at the deep end. And I mean, a lot of my life has felt like that, just jumping in at the deep end. And once you've done that enough times, it forces you to be brave. And I mean, there's a quote I love from Babe Ruth, actually, that I come back to a lot, which is, "It's hard to beat a person who never gives up." And it kind of feels like my mantra sometimes, because when you persevere at something, when you dig your heels in and you think, this is tough, this is gonna take some courage, but you do that enough times and you build strength, you build resilience. Something I often end up talking about, where does resilience come from? And it's all those small victories that add up to make the big ones. And when you're feeling in a moment, for whatever reason, like, I can't do this, I just think back to those times when I've proven myself wrong, and I have done something like that, and it gives you that boost to push on. But I think, as you say, empathy is always the key thing there. It's about creating that human connection, because I found that time and time again through my own experiences and so many other trans people I know, that people hang back. And actually other friends as well. I've got a very good friend of mine, Natalie McGloin, who's also a racing driver, who she was in a car accident on the road, and so she's disabled, and she's doing incredible work with the FIA to improve disability and to improve accessibility for disabled people in motorsport. And she said the same thing. It's like, when people don't know what's the right thing to say, they find it easier to say nothing. And so I just always try to start that dialogue with people, because as soon as you form that human connection, that's how you start to build empathy, and that's how you really then start to create change. Because when people understand you and people empathize with you and feel what you've gone through and appreciate it, that's what really makes lasting change. I think that's what enables you to start making that impact, when you can talk to people and they understand you.
Most definitely. Empathy is definitely the key to starting the conversations, even if they're awkward, and getting informed, learning more about another person and another person's situation. And like you said, with the small victories to build your confidence. I mean, you even said that since transitioning, you've been taking control of your life, and the way that's manifested itself in your career has been nothing short of groundbreaking. And I got to tell you, it's true from the outside. I'm blown away. So tell us a little bit more about the successes you've had on and off the track.
I think, on the track, really, this all changed for me when I started transition. And as you say, it was just this complete shift in my outlook, and I think how that enabled me to focus and think, because I've been living in denial my whole life, and I'd always had this, it's like part of my brain focused on suppressing who I was, and when I stopped doing that, I was able to concentrate and do so many things. And this was, this first really showed itself when I went off to France in 2014, and I entered a race that I just had no previous expectations, long story short, I broke the class record and I won by 3 seconds, which in hill climb is, in hill climb, that's like a country mile.
Wow.
And that was the catalyst for me going, right, I need to go and race in France. and so, then there followed 3 years of just continually getting on the podium and fantastic results. And then going to 2017, the final year competing over there, I had the opportunity to move into circuit racing and to do an endurance race in the prototype I'd been competing in. And so I did that at Le Mans on the Bugatti circuit. And long story short, I've hardly done any circuit racing. I finished in third place, and I'm standing there on the podium at Le Mans with the full 24-hour logos on the backdrop, and I just had this real epiphany. It's the only way I can describe it. Where the last time I'd been there was 16 years previously, before I was even racing as a spectator, before I even thought I would transition, and I never dreamt that one day I'd be on the other side of the fence, stood on the podium at this event as the real me.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is one of the greatest moments in my life.
Wow.
And this is a sign that if I can go through everything I've gone through and get here, then I have to go for the 24 hours. And it was a huge moment. And I think really in terms of successes I've had off the track, a lot of things that have come since, because it inspired me to really start using my platform at that point in time to come back to the UK and start racing and say, okay, look, this is who I am. I'm a racing driver. I'm a Ninja Warrior contestant. I'm also transgender. This isn't the thing that defines me, but it's shaped part of who I am, and I'm proud to be me. And everything that's come, since in terms of working with charities, and it's really been enabled me to do more, I think.
And that's the exact direction I wanted to go in with you just now, talking about the charities. You're just such an inspiration anyway. And then doing charity work, in 2018, you initiated a campaign that led over 100 drivers competing with rainbow stickers on their cars in honor of Pride Month. It was a rare showing of solidarity in the heteromasculine world of motorsports. And then 1 year later, in 2019, you helped launch the advocacy organization Racing Pride, and you continue to work with LGBTQ organizations like Stonewall, Mermaids, and many others. So what is it like working with LGBTQ organizations to bring awareness to trans rights?
It's a very proud feeling, to be honest. I think it's something that needs to happen more and more. I think the trans community has made some big steps forwards, but I think that we have a long way to go still to really create the level of acceptance in society that anyone else takes for granted.
Yeah.
And so, it's fantastic because working with charities like Stonewall and Mermaids and Athlete Ally and Racing Pride, it really lends authority to what I'm doing in terms of, I think, giving me that additional support and platform to do more. Because I think having a platform is fantastic, and when you have that, you want to use it in the best way possible, to do the most, to have the best impact you can. And I think being able to draw on the resources of charities, especially like Stonewall, who are so invested in creating legislation to improve the rights and lives of the LGBTQ community, that they have huge experience and resources to help me do what I'm doing to the best of my ability, learning about policies, or if I'm doing an interview with the media, to have some guidance from them. When you can look at what we can do together, all the people working there to combine their energy and achieve more, but also having people like the Sports Champion program that they instigated a year ago, which I'm proud to be a part of. I think having those people who are role models to other kids, and we all know the impact that sport can have. So I think being visible in sport can reach so many people and can really change hearts and minds.
Exactly. Like you said in the beginning of the interview, growing up in the 80s, there weren't that many people that you could identify with on TV or in the movies. And now look at you. You are the role model that's inspiring so many other people out there in the world. It's amazing what you're doing. I'm blown away.
Thank you.
So back to work. You recently raced in the 24 hours at the Nürburgring as the first trans driver to do so. Congratulations. How did that feel? And what have you learned in preparation for the 24 hours of Le Mans?
I mean, it felt like something completely wild, to be honest. I've always watched the racing on the Nordschleife, and especially the 24-hour race with fascination, but also huge respect and trepidation for anyone who competes in that race, because it's so tough, and in many ways tougher than Le Mans because of the unforgiving nature of the track. So, I mean, it taught me a huge amount. It was again, a bit like jumping in at the deep end this year, because we had the race in September as opposed to May, so we had double the amount of running at night. We had some huge rain, which is probably fairly normal there. And it taught me a lot about just things like practical things, how the team works, how we develop a strategy for the driver stints, and how to just working with your teammates about things like that, because each driver has their preferences, and trying to manage everybody's what's going to get the best out of each driver, and what's going to play to everyone's strengths. But then there's also an element of compromise to in the car setup and all these different things, and I think it's one thing having an appreciation of that, but it's another thing to go and do it for the first time, and working with your teammates and motivating each other. It's a fantastic feeling. It really, really is. And I think also learning about the level of focus that you need when you're driving for long periods of time like that, because I mean, we were driving 1 hour 40 stints.
Wow.
So it's a long time just to be in the car, and then to cut out of the car, cool down, have some food, relax, then knowing how to then get yourself back in the kind of racing mode at crazy times in the morning, in the middle of the night, and then I think all the training to prepare for that as well, to improve your focus. Like I do a lot of meditation. I meditate every day, and training on the sim and fitness, and your diet, all these things. So it made me feel like, coming away from that, I certainly feel like I've taken a big step towards the 24 hours of Le Mans. And I think also having the result that we had, coming away with 4th place in class, one step away from the podium for your first Nürburgring 24-hour race, was, it made me feel like this is a really good, a really good step towards achieving that goal. And it tells me I'm doing things right, basically.
And in the 24 hours, you drove the BMW M240i Racing. Charlie, what was that like?
I've really loved racing this car this season. I've got to be honest. The car is, so the M240i, it was a bit of a challenge to me after the car I was in last year, which had a huge amount of downforce. And obviously on the Nordschleife, you have so many undulations and bumps. I mean, you have 300 meters of elevation, so any car moves around a lot, and so trying to drive the car on the absolute limit, you're always working the balance, and especially in the wet, when grip level is changing constantly from corner to corner. So you really have to be on your toes on any car. And I mean, it forces you to focus. Like, you can't lose your focus for a moment.
Wow.
One of the great things about this car as well is that it has so much torque. So you have to bear in mind the whole race was wet. So the engine gives you a lot of flexibility because the 3-litre straight six twin turbo has such a great amount of torque from low revs. You can put the car in a higher gear, and in the wet it gives you more stability. So it's as a driver, you're always having to try and find ways to try and find grip, because the grip is changing from corner to corner, and so that kind of power delivery really helps you. And on a 24-hour race, anything that gives you an advantage. So it was fantastic to drive there. A lot of fun.
Fantastic. All right, the moment that we've all been waiting for. Oh, you are looking to race at the iconic 24-hour of Le Mans as the first trans person to compete in one of the most important races in the world. Oh, wow. What was the spark that made you decide to compete in Le Mans?
I think it was probably going there for the first time in 2001.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd always had this awareness of the 24 Hours of Le Mans and the significance of what it is, the romance of this oldest and most enormous endurance race with over 250,000 spectators. And when I went there and experienced it for the first time, I'd only ever been to club races, or I'd seen a few things at Donington, which is quite near me. Like, I'd seen DTM there and the European Le Mans series, but I'd never witnessed anything on the scale of Le Mans. And being there for almost a whole week, I remember the year I went with my oldest brother, and the first year we went, I'm sure it was like the wettest Le Mans they've ever had on record. And we got completely soaked to the bone. And then it would dry out, and then it would soak us again. And this has happened so many times throughout the entire week. I mean, it's an endurance event for the drivers and the teams, but also for the spectators when you're experiencing that. And I just, you get a lot of access at endurance racing. You get to go walk down the pits and see things pretty close up. And I just came away feeling like, because this was before I was racing, remember? And I just went away and I felt like, if I ever had the money to go racing, like someone, I had a lottery win, or some eccentric long lost uncle left me a fortune or something like that. This is without doubt what I would do in motorsport. And then when I started racing, sure, initially never even thinking I'd have the budget to go circuit racing. Fast forward to 2017, and that moment when I was stood on that podium, and I remember that weekend, I remember walking into the circuit on my way into the garage for the first time with my kit bag over my shoulder, waving to the guy on the security gate, and thinking, this is a real pinch me moment. I was back to where I was when I was 2001. And I never dreamt that I'd be the other side of the fence. I'm walking into the garage thinking, imagine of all the people who've stood in this garage throughout the years. All the famous drivers, all the famous teams, all the iconic cars. And I'm here. I'm here doing this. And when I was on that podium, I just thought, this is crazy. If I can get here, I can get, I can do this. This is like a sign, it's like the universe trying to say to me, just keep going.
Yeah.
You're going in the right direction. Just keep pushing.
A living testament to manifesting something from the stands as a spectator to now behind the wheel. Fantastic. And you spoke a little bit about training, but especially now in these crazy times with Corona, how's training been going for you since Corona has hit. How's that changed your training, and how's it going?
Well, I've been very fortunate to be racing in Germany this year because I think the race season on the Nordschleife actually got back up and running. It was probably one of the first seasons to get us back on track. So inevitably, we had a huge break between March and when we actually got racing in June. But nonetheless, I mean, I did a lot of esports racing this summer, like most racing drivers. But I was fortunate to race in some big championships like the ABB Formula E Race at Home Challenge, where I raced with BMW, which was pretty cool.
Wow.
I put over 200 hours of driving and racing into that championship. So it was a huge commitment from my side, but something that was an amazing opportunity to really throw yourself into a top level esports series like that. So yeah, inevitably, getting back in the car was a good feeling. For the first time, there was again a big gap between when I did my testing on the Nordschleife, which only culminated with about 8 laps, to actually going out into my first race weekend. So alongside that, a lot of running and cycling, and I'm fortunate to live in the countryside. So during lockdown, I still had the freedom to experience some of the amazing weather we had in the UK this summer and spring.
Nice.
And just to try and keep my mind focused. I feel like when I'm doing a lot of physical training, I mean, trail running is a massive part of my life, but also going to the gym now it's back open, and it's helped me keep that rhythm of training present, even if I kind of throttled off a little bit. I think it's gone pretty well.
Fantastic. So other than Le Mans, which is a huge goal in and of itself, other than that, what else are you looking forward to for the future? Is there anything big coming up other than Le Mans that you can tell us about?
So I recently announced that I'm going to be racing for Praga in the Brit Car Endurance Series next year.
Wow.
Which is a really amazing opportunity and a big step towards getting to Le Mans, because it's like a complete rocket ship, the Praga R1, 620 kilos in a carbon chassis with a 380 horsepower 2-litre turbo engine, huge aero package. So to be in a car with that kind of performance envelope is going to be really, really exciting. I've got a good fast teammate, Jack Fabi, who's already racing the car this season with some good results. And so I think we're going to be a great driving pairing for next season.
Wonderful.
So I'm going to be testing the car actually tomorrow, which is which has got my bags packed and everything right now. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think having it already set up and ready to go at this point in the season, when you consider a lot of the chaos we've had to deal with and work around in 2020, it's nice to think that's all happening, and to have the opportunity of working with a manufacturer like Praga is exciting. And I think really just hoping that obviously the COVID situation kind of levels out, and we can find our way back to some kind of normality and be able to enjoy motorsport with fans. I think that's been strange feeling this year, especially say at the 24-hour race, where you'd normally have over 200,000 people. For me, it was my first time there, so it was still an eye-opening moment just to be there competing, and the fact that we didn't have all the fans wasn't quite such a drawback. But I know for a lot of the regular drivers, they found it quite strange.
And, I'm sure.
When you watch the 24 Hours of Le Mans this season, it was nobody in the stands or anything. It was like watching a test day. It's such a strange thing to witness. But I think I'm sure we'll get back to some kind of normality next year, and fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, most definitely. With everything that you've achieved in your life so far, the highs, the lows, and everything in between, is Charlie Martin happy?
Good question. Well, I'm a Virgo, so I'm never fully satisfied with my achievements, I've got to say. But I'd say, fundamentally, yes, I am happy. I'm happy with what I've achieved so far in my life. Certainly, I think I feel like, yeah, I'm happy. I feel like there's still a lot more I want to do, so I'm still very very driven. I end up saying that a lot. It's probably sounds like a bit of a pun, but it's
it's fitting.
It works. Hey,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like my life restarted when I hit 30 and I started transition, and I feel like I opened up this whole new chapter of my life. And even in the context of the last 9 or so years since then, it's I found happiness in a peace that I never thought I would find in my lifetime, and so that's something that I can only be grateful for. And there's a whole load of other things I want to achieve going forwards. I think one of my things that really fascinates me at the moment and is the idea of trying to become carbon neutral. I think as a racing driver that there's a great example to set there, and so something I'm looking into in terms of all aspects of my life, how I can try and achieve that, and just keep going on to bigger and better things.
Fantastic. Wow. Well, from a spark as an 8-year-old wanting to be a fighter pilot to now training for the 24 Hours of Le Mans, Charlie Martin, you are a force to be reckoned with. From going through adversity of discovering who she is, transitioning, and coming out on the other side, proving to herself and the entire world that by being your true self, you can achieve absolutely anything. Charlie, you've made a huge impression on me, and I hope it has also made an impression on our podcast listeners. Thank you so much for spending time with us today and being on the show.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It's been a pleasure to speak.
And thank you for listening to this week's episode of Changing Lanes. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to our podcast for future episodes. And to dive deeper into all things BMW, head on over to bmw.com to learn more. I'm Jonathan, and this has been Changing Lanes. See you next time.